today. And Janelle has dropped in a lovely participant guide. Thank you to my Vanna, Janelle. Our outcomes today are rooted in the operations and systems portion of the Principal Performance Evaluation rubric. Our outcomes today are to explain the 4 types of funding sources available to schools, understand the principal's role in the school budget, and determine when to leverage your school finance controller. Before we dig in, let's take ourselves back to that principal rubric. If we hone in on the operations and systems page and look closely at the use of resources, this is where the finances and accounting comes into play. The principal's number 1 responsibility in this area is to leverage resources to provide students with learning opportunities, and the budget allows you to do this. So with us today, I'd like to welcome Debbie Sherda. Debbie, I hope I said it right.
You were close. You were very close.
I've been working on it, everybody. So Debbie is one of our school senior finance controllers here at the Service Center. She's been with NHA for nearly 9 years, and we're excited to have her here with us this afternoon. So Debbie, can you tell us a little bit about your role as a school finance controller and what do you do?
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see every one of you. The role of the school finance controller plays a critical role in supporting school and student needs. The SFC will monitor, analyze, and advise on budget decisions for multiple funding sources with our schools. We are responsible for understanding state and federal requirements, including grant awards, budgets, and assuring compliance regulations. We are your 211, and if you don't know the answer, we will get you the answer. If we don't know it, we will certainly get it for you. If there's a dollar sign, we should hear from you. We are a sounding board for principals. Our job isn't to say no, it's to help you find the best way to achieve your goal.
Right, so Debbie is our money person, everybody. She is one of the money people in this organization. Very important.
So there's 2 departments that fall under the school finance umbrella, SFC and PAA. You might be familiar with the SFC, but there is now a program accountability advisor as well to support and help you get through your audit and grant compliance.
Awesome. So 2 people to support us.
It's actually 2 major groups.
2 major groups.
Yeah, there's a lot of us.
They're an army of people with the money to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Awesome. So Debbie, we know that the budget is built on needs, not revenue. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Budget is built on needs, not revenue, as Emily stated. So we are not a use it or lose it organization. In a lot of government operations, spending goes way up in the last month of the year because if you don't spend all your allocated funds, they disappear. We do not do that. There is no incentive to buy things you can't use or don't need.
So when we were together for our last session, I don't know if you all remember Lindsay Moore. She discussed the importance of enrollment and how it influences or impacts our budget.
We look at your enrollment and number of classrooms and build the budget on expenses first. It doesn't matter if your revenue can cover those expenses or not. After all the expenses are accounted for, then the revenue is factored in, and we look to see if we need to contribute more funds to your school. Because of this, if your state aid revenue goes down, we do not cut your budget. If state aid goes up, we do not increase it either.
Right, so that's a little bit different from your regular public schools. So just something to keep in mind, one of the benefits of being with NHA. So one of our outcomes today, again, is that you all will be able to identify the 4 funding sources available to schools.
That's great, because today we will talk about 4 funding sources. On the screen, we have general funds, grant funds, board funds, and discretionary funds. And it will get you thinking about how a principal utilizes these resources to address student learning needs. Every month, your school finance controller emails your budget reports to you for each of these buckets. Your responsibility is to review, track, and adjust how you are leveraging your finances.
Debbie, so what are some of those allowable expenses under the general fund budget?
Allowable expenses, most importantly, are the salaries, books, and equipment. You'll see those right under there. They are typically expenses that you will see during the school day between 7:30 and 3:30.
Awesome. So let's take a moment now to, we're going to be going into some breakout rooms, but I want to share a couple of logistics with you first. So Janelle is going to drop in the chat a sample principles report. You are going to review this sample principles report with a group, and then you will answer one of 3 questions that is assigned to your group. We'll come back together, and then your group will share out the answer to the question, and Debbie will let us know, hey, you're on the right track, or don't forget to think about these pieces. So here are the 3 questions. The first question is, what are your biggest cost drivers? The second question is, which items currently show a deficit? And the third question is, which items would you want to watch and manage? Before we get into our breakout rooms, I'm going to have Debbie explain what a cost driver is.
A cost driver is a direct cause of a business expense. A cost driver in any activity that triggers a cost of something else. For example, if you take units of water, are the cost drivers, and the water bill is the cost.
Okay. So what is driving that cost? Any questions? Yep, go ahead, Evie.
Can she repeat that one more time?
Sure.
So a cost driver is, for an example, is the units of water. So if we look at the units of water when we get the bill each month, it drives what the actual expense is going to be that we're going to see on that invoice that month.
Any other questions about that? All right. So Janelle, we're going to be in 3 breakout rooms. If you are in the first breakout room, you will answer the cost driver question. If you are in the second, you will answer the question regarding deficits. And if you are in the third, it's watch and manage. Remember that this is a learning opportunity for everyone. So if you're not right on, it's okay. We're here to learn together. Any additional questions before we go into those breakout rooms? All right, we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Well, welcome back, everyone. Everybody's faces are like, what is this, right? It's okay because we have the awesome school finance controller team to support us. Thank goodness, right? So in group 1, we'll have group 1 speak out on what are your biggest cost drivers, and then Debbie will kind of frame that up there for us as well. So group 1. Oh, I probably should have recorded who was in group 1 too. Debbie, who was with you just a moment ago?
Okay, so I guess I'll.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We did identify. We were stuck for a minute, and we were so happy that Debbie came to help us understand. We were looking at what compared to the water example, and we did identify like supplies, the copier, and paper. But when Debbie came, she also Jennifer did also one of the people in the group said salaries, and we were debating like I said. Salary, that's something that stays the same because we have to hire these people, but she made a good point, like it does fluctuate, and Debbie came in and clarified that. So that's one of our biggest cost drivers because when we have to pay somebody more than what they're worth because we need, not worth, I'm sorry, that wasn't a good word, but more than what we would typically pay a person,
right?
Because we need that person. We're in dire need of a math teacher, so we're going to pay more just to get that person in because there's nobody out there. So that's where that driving force was, and she identified how she would be the one giving the why, identifying the why behind that, whereas we would be responsible for things such as like meals, paying, spending dollars on meals every day for our staff. Those are the things that we can control. So those are our biggest costs: the salary, paper, copier, and meals.
Yeah, that copy paper.
And I think that was helpful, like for me to think about those drivers, because I guess I wouldn't have thought that that a lot of that, like we're paying our staff to eat, every week or once a month. Like I wouldn't have thought of that. But I can see when she said that's something that you can control. Whereas a teacher comes off the street, you've looked and looked and looked, can't find a math teacher. Oh, here's one. Like, we want to snag this one up. We're going to have to pay them a little bit more. That made sense. So a little bit more out of our control if we really, really want someone, but definitely in our control as far as like, hey, let's pay our staff let's feed our staff every Friday.
They're hungry, right? I know.
Right.
But
They might
sometimes
say.
it might just be a granola bar.
Well, the one thing that we keep saying about the meals that we're seeing a lot of is that there's no reason to pay them to do their jobs. It's like they're there to do their job, and you wouldn't do that with your own personal budget. So why would you want to do it with the public dollars?
Yes. Well, people are hungry. They like to eat. It makes
Bring
them
your
happy. It makes them happy when they have a little something special. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing it now and again. It's the every week, every day thing.
Yes.
I think Debbie made a great point in the sense that it's public knowledge. So if you're not willing to defend what you're spending, probably shouldn't be spending it.
Exactly.
Ooh,
No,
all right.
absolutely true.
Debbie,
You don't
anything
want
else?
it to end up in a paper? Don't do it. If you think it's going to be something bad press, absolutely don't do it.
Debbie, anything else that you want to add for us there?
So this spreadsheet is quite overwhelming. Obviously, you're only seeing a one piece of it, but there's many, many columns on there. But I did mention this to the first group, and we are going to reiterate this as we go on. But that column with state aid is the area where you'll have most control on, and that is the area where I'll have the most comments on. The comments you'll find at the very bottom of the report. In the email that I will send along with this report, along with some other reports, will wrap up exactly where you stand. If you are behind where you need to be, or if you're over budget, whatever it may be, we'll emphasize that so that you know going forward what you can control and what you can't, and why you're in the situation you are.
Good. Yes. Group 3, when I visited them, they asked that too. How do you know? And I'm like, well, you get a report. Thank God for the report and for our school finance controller, right? For sure.
And unfortunately, we haven't had this available to us this past year with Oracle. So this is coming back, and I know the schools want it. They need it. We've desperately been trying to get it back to you. So we start working on those in the next few days. So those are going to be really busy and very much good information for you guys.
Yes. And so moving into group, go ahead, Becky.
I'm just curious, since it hasn't been available to principals over this year, what have they been using?
Honestly, the one things that we've only been able to send out to the schools have been the board reports. So we've been trying to keep the boards informed on everything, and that is what we have been able to give them. It is the whole perspective. The nice part about the principal report, it gives you a lot deeper detail than a board fund report does. This will just get right down in the nitty gritty. So the schools have received the board reports. We have been able to tell the boards where they stand each month, but they're looking for more detail, and especially the principals, rightfully so. And this is going to be able to give it to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky. So moving into group 2, which items on the principal report that you viewed currently show a deficit? So this is our group 2.
And they did not get any help from their person in their room. I just
No,
they
we
had
didn't.
great
Okay.
questions.
Yeah,
Nope.
we asked her questions, and this was Janelle.
That's the best poker face ever.
So it sounds like you guys got some help, but us 3 were trying to figure it out.
I didn't want to impede your wonderful questions. Bring them to the group. They were awesome.
Yes, bring it to the
They
group.
know who they can trust to answer the questions. That's why they were.
Janelle literally just did us. She was like, "That's a great question." I don't know, Jenny,
Let me help you with that, because the best thing about the principal report is we highlight things. We highlight things that are going to be over budget. So if it's 10,000 or greater, you're going to see a comment on it. So you're seeing some yellow on that spreadsheet, because those are the ones that are negative. If there's a parenthesis around it, it's in a negative situation. It means it was overspent.
Okay, so we definitely do have, because that's what we were talking about. So now we are even more confused, because that's what we started talking about. I'm like, there has to be some significance to the yellow. But however, I do have a question for you then, because not all of the yellows are in parentheses. But when we were originally looking at it, we thought if it was in parentheses, that was a negative we were in. But if you actually look at the other lines, the parentheses look like that's actually extra money, because like, for example, the first line, the actual was 1,146 and the budget was 196. So
Right.
we actually budgeted more than we spent, giving us a 50,000 variance.
Yep.
So in that one in parentheses, that's where the confusion was coming, and we were trying to ask Janelle, but those ones in parentheses, that's actually a plethora. Like we didn't spend that money. So when we were looking,
it depends, because it depends if you're in revenue or expenses too, because the revenue is up at the top and the expenses are, you'll see about 5 lines that are so right up at the top where it says revenue.
Yeah.
And then you see the expenses all following that. So if it's an expense and it's in parentheses, it's a negative situation. But if it's 10,000 or greater, whether it be negative or positive, you're going to see comments on it, because we're going to let you know why it is the way it is. But in the negative situation, yes, negative means you've overspent. But in the sake of, if it's a $10,000 positive variance, we still want to comment on that, because for whatever reason, it could be in the salaries that we have a $10,000 positive variance. It could mean that you have an opening in a classroom. So I would want to identify what exactly is happening with that.
So you're saying if there's no, then we did have a bit, because at first we were that way and then we switched it. So you're saying if there's no parentheses, then that's a negative?
No, and like no parentheses in the expense area, it's not a negative. It means that your budget is greater than your expenses. So you have actually you have more money that you did not spend that month that we expected you to spend, and there's a lot of time a reason why.
Okay, so you're like, if we're looking at it this, so expense wise, we actually didn't spend $112,682, but you're saying you highlighted the one in yellow. That's like the professional development. So that's what we should be looking at, like the ones that are in the yellows, to see why we didn't spend that money.
I'm going to look at it bigger so I can see what we're talking about. So you're seeing $10,000.
Sorry, I have to toggle. I'm sorry, guys, because I'm not going to lie. The three of us sat there and we were confused. I'm not.
No, you're fine. So you've got a 10,624 negative on salaries and benefits. Do you see that? Like where it says basic instruction, and then there's salaries and benefits right under it. And then to the right, there's a highlighted 10,624 that's negative. So that means that we've overspent salaries by 10,624. But the one below it is 10,285 without parentheses.
Right. So that means we didn't spend that.
That's correct. So that means substitute pay. We did not spend what we thought we would have at this point in the year. Because keep in mind, this is year to date. So you've got, this is through, I think this was through December that we were doing. So all these numbers that are in those actual columns are year to date. So when we send December reports are going out, January is coming. So January would be 7 months worth of expenses. So that would be your actual column. Your budget column would be 7 months worth. And then the annual budget, the nice part about this report is that your annual budget, not only are we looking at, are you overspent at this point in the year, but have you already overspent for the entire year? because we'll look at that annual budget column too. That's why it's important to look at those variance columns and determine where do you stand at this point in time. $10,000 on a salaries and benefits overage 6 months into the year, there's a reason for it, but it's not a huge deal in the all scheme of things because we have $1 million budget in salaries right then. So it's really not material but if you, if further down on the report, you can't see it here, but if you had $100,000 overage on a water line per se at this point in the year, there is a darn good reason why that happened, and most likely it could have been a water main break or something like that. So those type of comments are really important, but there's also things that are out of your control. So you've got professional development that NHA does for you. So that NHA-based professional development, which you see a 9449 negative. You see that one that's highlighted down about the middle of the screen? Mm-hmm. So something like that, if it's NHA based, you can't control that. That is what the service center is doing for your school. So I will comment on there saying that it's NHA based professional development. This line is out of your control. Does that make sense?
And so Debbie, one of the reasons I didn't want to answer questions was I wanted them just to get the sense of the overwhelmingness of the report, right? And that's what every new principal experiences is, oh my golly, how am I going to manage all this? But the other piece I want them to hear from you is that partnership piece where you narrow the focus for them. They're not expected to look at every line item. And as you get familiar with it, you'll start to see like a water bill that's really high. And you may say, I don't know why this is on here. Or it may be a comment from you saying, we know it's high. Don't worry about that. Or, hey, this is high. Let's talk about what's going on in this area.
And if it is high, I'm going to tell you why, because I have to pull out the bill and look at what exactly did happen and work with facilities because they will be able to tell me, yep, they had whatever happen. Your eyes should go towards that student aid section because that is the area that you have most control on. But the whole picture, the total column all the way to the right, is actually the responsibility of the school. But again, there are areas that are out of your control. But try to focus your eyes on student aid because those are the areas that you do have the most control, and that is the area where I'm going to comment the most on.
So let's visit our last group really quickly. These are some great questions, but there's a lot more goodness for us to get to before our time is up. So group 3, what items would you want to watch and manage? Group 3.
So there was so much to look at. We kind of just tried to go line by line and kind of make some comparisons. I think at one point we saw that, we saw like indirect costs was that like down $20,000 compared to like our actual budget. So we were wondering like, what does that mean? What are considered, or what can be considered indirect costs?
Indirect costs are out. That's not something you need to worry about. Okay. It's a line it's regarding grants. So we've got that indirect costs, I believe, is not even in that student aid section area. You probably saw it way over to the right. Yeah, it's in the grant side because you've got little expenses that are related to the grants budget specifically. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to see very much difference in what we expect when it comes to indirect costs. You're going to see more in the salaries area, in the operations of the actual building itself.
Yeah, when we looked at salaries, we were saying that like when we like looking for the next year when it comes to like pay raises, you want to watch and kind of manage those that you would not go over budget in that department. And then we saw that there was like opportunities for additional training because at the time they hadn't met like any of the budget that was available for training. So just if they could bring in more people or send staff to other trainings, they had money for that. And they were talking about like supplies. That was something that you want to manage. Because at first we were like, we just see people ask for things like, hey, I need more paper or chart paper. And we're like, where does that even come from? We were just talking about like, who keeps up with that? If this person says, hey, we need to order more chart paper. Okay, like we tell like the office aide to order it, but who, the principal has to go back and track that? Like, how does that work?
So typical expenses such as that, like copy paper and all that type of thing, you don't want to waste paper, because paper it's so easy to, if you think about how many trees that are cut down. That being said, you need the paper for these kids. It's like there are activities that you're going to need. So if you need it, if it absolutely is needed, you need to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't scrinch on buying paper if you feel I'm going to go over budget. If you need it, we're going to have to buy it. And in all honesty, you're probably going to see that equal itself out bottom line, because one line could be over a little bit because you had to have all that paper, but then another line might be way under budget. So you look all the way down to the bottom, where I'll explain in the emails that are coming out with this type of report, saying bottom line, this is where you're at. I'll tell you, at this point in time, you are ahead of where we expect you to be, or you're behind where you're expected to be. But many times, because we have to spread the budget over an entire year, we spend a majority of the budget, pretty much like 75% of the budget, in the first quarter of the school year. So we spread the budget for the whole 12 months though. So you could be over the first quarter, and it could be a complete timing thing. By the end of the year, you could be right back in line.
Yep.
But
Well,
paper,
thank you.
those type of things you need.
Thank you, Ashley and Debbie. So just to sum up this portion, I'm glad everybody took away so much from it. And I hope that you're taking away that your school finance controller is a knower of all things money. So anytime you have a question, do not hesitate to reach out to them. You have a lot of control over that student aid section, which Debbie had shared quite a few times. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. And when you become a principal, to those monthly emails. So I just want to talk about this quote really quick. It's much easier to stay out of trouble now than to get out of trouble later. So we're going to talk about some cautionary tales that have actually happened, which may blow your mind. Please pay attention to my sound effects too. So getting into grant funds, alert, a cautionary grant through the ISD. They got it. They began implementing a new program without telling their school finance controller. As a result, this was not reflected in the school's budget, and it wasn't reported to the state, which caused an audit of the school's finances. Additionally, the fine print on the grant also forced the school and NHA to share detailed student data with the ISD. At the end of the grant period, NHA was not comfortable with the grant stipulations, and the school ended up having to return the grant, and NHA had to eat the costs. Debbie, speaking about these grant funds, so we want to be cautioned with our grant funds. We're not going to be requesting these grant funds from outside sources without talking to your school finance controller. When does this investment meeting take place with schools?
Grant budgets are reviewed a couple times per year. This happens in the spring with projected funds, and then in December when actual allocations are revealed. This is different than the general budget because we cannot cover the expenses you have planned for in this area, and we do as we do with general funds. With all grant funds, we have to follow the guidelines when it comes to an audit risk. We can't just spend the money because the dollars are there. This pertains to all grants. We must meet 85% of the allocation that we received, and any carryover must be spent by a certain date each year. The communication between school principal and the SFC is vitally important.
What about these ESSER funds that everybody's been getting lately?
ESSER grants are acknowledged on the principal report. Each month, the principal will receive a packet including the principal report, discretionary fund balance, board fund, and a grant report, which will include ESSER, ESSA, and other authorized grants.
All right, Debbie, one more question here. What other items should I think about when it comes to using grant funds?
Schools need to be careful with supplanting. Grant funds should and typically are used to supplement services for the school. For COVID funds, this rule doesn't apply. Not always supplemental. If the school is required to do an activity, then use the general fund. If it is a supplemental, then grants could cover the expense. If you have a unique situation, feel free to give us a holler and then we can walk you through it.
Right. When in doubt, just call your school finance controller. Uh-oh. Looks like we're into another cautionary tale with board funds. Keep in mind that board funds are 100% public information and auditable. Imagine the headline: for-profit NHA school spends taxpayer education funds for cruises and salon visits. That's right. Let's say you purchased a harmless dinner cruise for your staff outing, or you're spending money to have your front office staff pampered as appreciation. But it doesn't look like that on a board budget. So be very careful of spending those precious dollars. Consider what that staff engagement item will look like on their budget. Debbie, when would a principal choose to use board funds?
An allowable use of board funds would be to cover expenses outside the regular school day, such as athletics, summer school, or uniforms are prime examples.
Great. So how do I get access to these board funds? Can I just use them and get reimbursed?
No board funds may be spent prior to the board approving a resolution from that activity. Requesting of board fund is electronic. Each month you receive your board report and the SFC will include a link to requesting new board funds. The approval process for each request will begin with your SFC, then once approved, will be sent to your DSQ. After the SFC and DSQ has approved, the board representative will include the request in the board packet for the next meeting. The board fund request form and policy guidance can be found on SLE, which is School Leadership Experience, under resources and board documents.
Ah, that favorite button of SLE. So where can I look to determine if I could use board funds to pay for something?
This can be found in Compass under board documents. The following will give you some guidance as to what categories board funds are typically requested and some examples of each category. I have also included some examples which we do not recommend use of on the board funds, such as gift cards, teacher bonuses, or alcohol. Gift cards should be used at all. Do not do
no. Those are major no-nos. Don't do it.
Yes.
All right. Tell us about stipends and how do they work?
Stipends for athletics can be drawn from board funds. Stipends are taxable. Please note, hourly staff cannot receive stipends, although the exception is through board funds for coaching or leading clubs. These may receive stipends through board funds.
Okay, paying those athletics. Moving into another cautionary tale about discretionary funds. So discretionary funds should have a direct benefit to the students. So think about this. If you are spending this money that parents have sent with their kids to the school for you to build up your discretionary account, please be mindful that, let's say they find out, oh, I've been buying dinner and massages with my discretionary fund. How would the parents feel? If you have to explain how this money is being spent, would those parents be okay with it? So please think of that as you're spending those discretionary funds. Debbie, so where else do we get these discretionary funds from?
You can increase revenue by discretionary funds through building rental fees, fundraisers, charging parents for late pickup, or many other ways, which may vary by state.
What about PTOs?
Let me just add one. Yeah, I was just going to add that. PTOs are a separate entity and cannot have their funds mixed in with the principal discretionary. PTOs also need to be an official 501c3, so they're separate. PTOs need to be keeping their books, and we keep our books. Don't intermix them.
Excellent. So is there a document that outlines the usage of the principal discretionary funds?
You can locate the policy and support documents for principal discretionary funds on the Compass tile under Financial Services menu.
Awesome. I hear that each school principal has a school visa.
Yes, that is true. You can locate the corporate credit card policy on the Compass tile financial service menu. Oracle is used to submit and approve credit card purchases. Visas need to be reconciled weekly. And I will add to this as well. Visas should only be used for emergencies or travel, but do not put everything on a visa. You'll want to use your purchase order system as much as you possibly can.
Yes, just ask your principals about their Oracle reports, their financial reports when they have everything on a visa. So yes, thank you, Debbie, for sharing that. Very important. Remind me once again where I can find all of these resources and policies.
Emily, you can find all these policies by visiting My NHA, then Compass, and click on Financial Services.
Great. As a new principal, keeping up with expenses can be really tricky. What do you suggest principals do to ensure their budget is organized and balanced?
Tracking expenses is important. Whether you use a spreadsheet or another method, you need to think about how you will be tracking your expenses. Knowing your budget and your approval expenses each month will be necessary. For example, with discretionary funds, you will know the funds that you were raised and what expenses you will have against those funds to properly track what is remaining. The reports at the end of the month should not be a surprise to you if you are tracking these expenses regularly. The other thing that I want to add too on discretionary is it's important that the school knows what they have in their discretionary account, because right now with Oracle, we don't get the detail like we used to get prior to Oracle. So the more that the school keeps track of what's coming in and what's going out in discretionary, the better off you are. I can tell you what you have bottom line, but those details, it's critical that the school knows what's there.
So what are some good practices to have in place when a dean or a teacher wants an item to be purchased?
You will want to have systems in place. An example is a school fund request form, such as what's on the screen. Procedure to request, approve, and track. As a new principal, people will come to you all the time. And this type of a document will help you remember, because you're doing 1,000 things at once. So if you have this detail to back yourself up, it's like, oh yeah, I get that. I think that's a good thing that we should do. We'll go ahead and do that. But then in 6 weeks, if somebody came to you wanting the same thing, you're like, wait a minute, you just ordered that.
Yes, so definitely keep track of those things. We were going to get into another cautionary tale, but please make sure that you have some good checks and balances regarding cash handling policies with your staff to make sure that money is not just disappearing. So Debbie's going to point out a few proper cash handling procedures for us here.
Yeah, NHA school money handling, deposits, and security policy is available on campus. That's something you really want to become familiar with. Money should not be collected by the register. Money should be collected by the register and must be always stored in the safe. Cash must be deposited at least once a week. We don't want to find out that we have money in a safe that's been there for 6 weeks, because it just gives opportunity for some crime to happen. We pray that that doesn't happen, but the more you put in the bank every week, the less it will happen. Make sure you retain oversight of money handling. Money for the PTO should not be collected by the school, and money should not be collected for the purpose of donating to a nonprofit organization. So if you had money, if your kids wanted to do a cancer fundraiser, have the PTO do all that tracking. We do not want that money on our books, because it shouldn't be on our books, because it is a complete separate organization and it shouldn't be on our books at all.
Should schools be keeping cash on site, Debbie? Should they have that petty cash?
Yeah, we got rid of petty cash a number of years ago for good reason, because it just gives opportunity for having money on hand that can be taken or whatever it is. So we do not want to have petty cash in the school at all.
All right. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Oh, look at our superwoman.
If I could only be that skinny.
Don't mind my editing.
Not happening.
So remember, everyone, Debbie and the school finance controller team is your person. So remember that you can always reach out to them, right, Debbie?
Absolutely.
any
We have a large
questions.
team, so feel free to reach out to your school finance controller specific to your school. If they don't know the answer, they will get you the answer.
Awesome. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our assignment. So continue in your learning. Thanks,
Let you go. Have a good
Debbie.
evening, ladies.
Thank you. You are going to be interviewing your principal to gain a better understanding of your school's finances. So be sure to bring the wonderings that you have from today's session with you. You'll also receive this assignment via email with directions and guiding questions. However, you do not have to turn this assignment into your PPA coach, but you should let them know when you have it done so that we can discuss it with you and answer any additional questions that you have. We also have one more assignment. Hopefully all of you will be joining us for our March principals meeting that's coming up in just a couple of weeks here. But you can go through this just to help you prepare for the meeting and then to reflect after the meeting. Also, you will not need to turn this in to your coach either, but do be prepared to discuss it. And some reminders for all of you. Your PPA journey continues. Whoop, whoop. We have our one-on-one coaching call in March, and then there's that March principals meeting with that fun assignment. And then in April, you'll have your one-on-one coaching call as we get into the thick of testing season. And then in May, you'll have your final one-on-one coaching call and our PPA retreat. Please note that this is a change in location. We originally were going to go to Hocking Hills, but due to some timing issues, we are back at Punderson Manor. So that will be May 3rd through the 5th. So as you all are getting ready to make your testing calendars, make sure that you schedule your grade levels on a different day because we want you to be there. This is an incredible experience that you will absolutely love. Mary will be reaching out soon with all of your details. And one takeaway that I want to leave you with today is about the importance of moving from a passive participant. So you're not just taking the information from your school finance controller and relying on them, but becoming an active participant. So ask them the questions that you've been asking today and really get involved. So we want you to become an active arranger. We want you to know what your budget looks like. We want you to intentionally connect that money and resources where your students need it most. So today I launch you with a quote from our friend Jim. You must take personal responsibility. You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself. That is something you have charge of. Thank you for joining us today and for your extra 2 minutes. I appreciate all of you who have spent your time with us today, especially those of you on break. I look forward to seeing you in March.